Heat pressed down on the yard like a fist. The air shimmered, heavy with dust and the smell of oil from the rusted machinery that lined the fence. Evelyn Ross stood with her hands rough against the wood post, hammer poised, while the men at the gate laughed. Their laughter wasn't cruel enough to sound like open hostility. Not yet. It was worse than that. Mocking, dismissive, the kind that assumed she had already surrendered. She didn't look at them. Not at the boots slamming against gravel, not at the rifles dangling loose in hands that had never worked a day of honest labor. She kept her eyes on the nail in the fence post, steady as if that single point of focus could keep her invisible. To them, she was already invisible. A widowed farmer, her hair silvered, her frame weathered. A woman meant to be pitied, not feared. The leader, tall, hair slicked back, shirt pressed clean like a banker instead of a raider, stepped forward. He smiled as though this was a visit, not an invasion. "Miss Ross," he said, rolling her name across his tongue like it was already his to own. "Fine piece of land you have here. Shame it's falling apart. Shame it isn't in stronger hands." The men behind him chuckled, a sound sharp as broken glass. Evelyn set the hammer down with deliberate slowness. She felt every muscle in her back stretch against the weight of silence. She had endured silence for decades, through the war, through the return, through the way her neighbors spoke over her as if she were furniture. Silence was her armor. But her granddaughter broke it. "Leave her alone!" Leah's voice cracked against the yard, raw with fear. She had stepped out from the porch, fists balled though her arms trembled. Only 20, and still believing that anger could shield the ones she loved. One of the men whistled. "Pretty little thing. Brave, too." His eyes lingered, oily, calculating. Evelyn's chest tightened. She moved, not fast, not enough to draw suspicion, just placing herself between Leah and their eyes. The leader's grin sharpened. "Protective. That's sweet. But let's be honest, Miss Ross. You can't hold this place alone. My friends and we're offering you a way out, a comfortable end to your troubles." The word end hung in the air like smoke. Evelyn's gaze shifted past him to the horizon. The fields stretched wide and open, each row of brittle grass carved by her hands and her husband's before he was lowered into the earth. Every inch of this soil carried memory. To them, it was acreage. To her, it was breath. "You should go," she said softly. The laughter swelled. A shove landed hard against her shoulder. She staggered, dust rising around her boots, but her eyes never left the horizon. Leah cried out and tried to reach her, but another man caught the girl by the wrist, yanking her back. Evelyn raised her hand, a gesture that looked like surrender, but wasn't. "Don't," she whispered. Leah froze, confusion battling with terror in her young face. The leader leaned close, so close Evelyn could smell his cologne, sharp and artificial against the raw honesty of earth and sweat. "Do you know what happens to stubborn people in this county?" he asked. "They vanish. Their land changes hands. No one asks questions. No one remembers." His words were meant to frighten, but what he didn't see, what none of them saw, was the calculation behind her stillness. Evelyn's silence wasn't weakness. It was assessment. Her eyes swept the yard, marking the angle of rifles, the distance between shadows, the way Leah's captor stood with his weight uneven on one leg. Years of discipline coiled tight within her, hidden beneath the shell of a tired widow. A younger man among them stepped forward, restless. He pressed the barrel of his rifle against Evelyn's temple. The laughter quieted, waiting for the spectacle. "Maybe we should end this now," he sneered. His finger brushed the trigger. Leah screamed. Evelyn did not blink. Her heartbeat slowed, not sped. She had been here before, in alleys halfway across the world, with muzzles against her skin and voices promising oblivion. Fear was a language she had long since learned to silence. The boy with the rifle faltered. Something in her eyes unsettled him, something that didn't match the frail frame before him. He pressed harder, almost desperately, as if force could erase his doubt. Evelyn stood unyielding, the oak tree behind her casting a shadow that seemed to anchor her to the land itself. "Pull the trigger if you want," she said, voice low enough that only he could hear. "But know what comes after." His grip trembled. The leader barked an order, sharp and irritated, pulling the moment back under his control. "Enough! We don't waste bullets on old women." He signaled to his men. "Search the house. Find the deed. Bring me proof it's ours now." Boots thundered across the porch, glass shattered inside, drawers yanked open and overturned. Leah struggled against the man holding her, but his grip was iron. Evelyn watched without moving, her eyes narrowing only slightly as a photograph was torn from the wall and tossed aside. A photograph that showed her younger, in uniform, medals half hidden by shadows. The men laughed at it, dismissing it as a relic. They never looked close enough to see what it meant. Leah's voice rose again, frantic. "Grandma, please, do something!" Evelyn's fingers curled into her palm, nails biting against calloused skin. She inhaled the heat, the dust, the sharp scent of gasoline spilling where they had smashed her fuel drums. All around her, decades of memory cracked under careless hands. Still, she did not move. Not yet. The leader turned back toward her, holding up a framed picture he had taken from the living room. Her husband's smile stared from beneath the shattered glass. "Tell me where the papers are, Miss Ross," he said, "or this place burns before nightfall." He pulled a lighter from his pocket, flame dancing bright in the hot wind. Evelyn lowered her eyes, shoulders seeming to bow beneath invisible weight. She whispered, almost inaudible, "In the study. Bottom drawer." He smiled, triumphant. He thought the fight had already been won. He reached out and patted her cheek as though she were a compliant child. "That's better." But the flame in the lighter flickered, catching briefly in the reflection of her eyes. What he didn't see was the steel hidden there, the calculation already in motion. Leah saw it, just for a heartbeat, as Evelyn's gaze locked with hers across the dust-filled yard. The girl's breath caught. For the first time since the convoy arrived, fear loosened its grip on her chest. Because in her grandmother's eyes, she saw not surrender, but something else. A promise. And then Evelyn lowered her head again, hiding it all beneath silence. Shadows stretched long across the farmhouse walls as the intruders ransacked every room. The crash of furniture toppled, the sharp splinter of breaking glass, the cruel laughter of men dismantling a life piece by piece, all of it wrapped around Evelyn Ross like smoke. She stood unmoving in the yard, dust clinging to her sweat-soaked shirt, the heat clinging to her skin like a second punishment. Leah writhed in the grip of the man holding her. His hand clamped over her mouth, muffling her protests, while his eyes never left Evelyn. He was waiting, perhaps, for the moment when the old woman's calm cracked, when the illusion of control shattered. It did not come. Evelyn's stillness unnerved him. From inside, one of the men emerged waving a drawer high over his head. Papers spilled across the porch, caught by the wind, scattering like broken promises into the dirt. "Nothing here," he shouted in Spanish. "Just old bills. Useless." The leader cursed, snapping his lighter shut. He stalked toward Evelyn, his polished boots grinding against the gravel. "You lied," he said softly, dangerously. Evelyn lowered her gaze as though in shame, though her mind catalogued every sound, every angle. The rifle nearest her was held by a man with lazy fingers, his stance casual. Another had set his down against the porch railing while digging through drawers. The one restraining Leah had a pistol jammed into his waistband, but his grip on the girl was sloppy. Details. Always details. "I didn't lie," she murmured. Her voice carried the fatigue of years, but underneath it was steel. "I said the study. Perhaps you're not searching deep enough." The leader's smile returned, thin and cold. "Search again," he barked. "Tear up the floor if you must." More boots thundered inside. The house groaned under the assault. Evelyn could almost feel each impact in her chest, each violation of the place she had kept sacred since her husband's death. The kitchen cabinets thrown open, the glass of wedding photos cracking under careless heels, the sound of her past trampled without thought. Leah made another desperate attempt to pull free. The man cursed, twisting her arm. Evelyn's breath caught, a flicker of anger threatening to break her composure. For a heartbeat, she imagined stepping forward, striking, reclaiming her granddaughter with one precise motion. But timing was survival. Patience was everything. The leader saw the flicker and mistook it for weakness. He leaned in close, his voice low so only she could hear. "Do you know what I see when I look at you? A relic. A piece of furniture someone forgot to throw out. You think silence makes you strong, but silence makes you forgotten." He smirked. "And forgotten people are so very easy to bury." Evelyn raised her head slowly. Dust clung to the lines of her face, sweat ran down her temple. Her eyes, however, were clear, calm. "You mistake quiet for weakness," she said. "That's your first mistake." The words unsettled him. Just for a moment. Long enough for one of his men to rush out, waving a photograph. "Boss!" he shouted. "Look at this!" It was the framed image they had sneered at earlier, of Evelyn in uniform, rifle slung across her back, medals pinned to her chest. The younger men crowded around, curiosity flickering in their eyes. "She was military?" one muttered. The leader took the frame, glanced at it, then tossed it aside. The glass shattered against the porch steps. "Old stories," he said dismissively. "She's no soldier now, just a widow clinging to dirt." But his voice lacked conviction, and Evelyn heard it. Leah's eyes locked with her grandmother's. The girl had seen the photograph too. Her breath quickened, not in fear this time, but in recognition. Questions burned behind her gaze. "Who are you really? What have you hidden from me?" The leader turned away, shouting fresh orders. "Burn the barn! Flush her out if she's hiding anything. I want this place ash before sundown." Two men peeled off, heading toward the structure where the horses shifted nervously, their ears twitching at the scent of strangers. Evelyn's hands curled tighter at her sides. To lose the house was one thing. To lose the animals, the last living pieces of her husband's dream, that was something else. She stepped forward, just a fraction, and the men tightened their grips on weapons. The leader laughed. "Ah, there it is," he said. "The fight I was waiting for. Took you long enough, Miss Ross." Evelyn's voice was steady. "You walk into my land, destroy what's mine. Threaten my kin, and you think you understand fight? You haven't seen it yet." A sudden sound cut across the yard, a sharp whistle, high and close. Every head turned. From the ridge beyond the pastures came the wail of a siren, faint but growing. Patrol cars, lights flashing faintly against the heat haze. The leader cursed under his breath. He wasn't ready to face uniforms yet, not with half his men inside and nothing secured. "Move!" he barked. "Grab what you can. Back to the trucks." Chaos erupted. Men spilled from the house with armfuls of jewelry boxes, tools, scraps of paper that meant nothing. Others shoved past one another toward the vehicles, engines roaring to life. Leah was released in the confusion, stumbling free. Evelyn caught her, steadying her with one arm. The leader lingered. He glared at Evelyn, anger simmering just below the surface. "This isn't over," he promised. "You can't hide behind badges forever. Next time there won't be sirens to save you." He retreated to his truck, slamming the door as dust and gravel sprayed across the yard. Within seconds, the convoy was gone, leaving only silence, broken glass, and the acrid scent of spilled fuel. Leah clung to Evelyn's arm, her voice trembling. "Grandma, What just happened? Who are they? Why didn't you? She broke off, unable to finish the questions choking her throat. Evelyn's eyes swept the yard. The house stood wounded, windows shattered, memories scattered across the dirt. The barn door hung half open where the men had nearly carried out their threat. Sirens grew louder, closer, cutting through the silence. She spoke quietly, almost to herself. They thought they saw a widow. They didn't look close enough. Leah stared at her, confusion and awe tangled in her young face. Evelyn's hand rested briefly on the girl's shoulder, a gesture of comfort, but also command. Not a word to anyone, she whispered. Not yet. The sirens were nearly at the gate now, red and blue lights painting the dust. Evelyn closed her eyes for the briefest moment. She had hoped her past would stay buried, but the earth had been disturbed, and buried things had a way of clawing back into the light. As the first patrol car skidded to a stop in the yard, Evelyn straightened her spine. Her silence was no longer enough. The patrol cars filled the yard with light and noise, their sirens fading into the heavy hum of engines. Deputies spilled out, boots pounding against gravel, weapons drawn but uncertain. Dust clung to their uniforms. Their eyes darted from the shattered house to Evelyn Ross, standing straight as a post, Leah trembling at her side. Sheriff Howard Kane emerged last. His hat was tipped low, his face cut with lines that told stories of power held too long. He took in the wreckage, the scattered papers fluttering across the yard, the smell of fuel sharp in the air. Lord above, he muttered. What in God's name happened here? Evelyn's jaw tightened. She studied him the way a soldier studies a map, measuring distance and intent. His voice was calm, but there was no surprise in his eyes. He had known something. Maybe everything. They came to take what isn't theirs, she said. Her voice was even, stripped of anything but fact. Convoy of men, armed. They searched the house, threatened my granddaughter. The deputies exchanged uneasy glances. One spat into the dirt. Another adjusted his belt, avoiding her gaze. Kane knelt to pick up a broken frame, brushing the dust from its cracked glass. The photograph inside showed Evelyn's late husband smiling on the porch, younger, strong, a man who had built this land with calloused hands. Kane set it back down gently, almost with respect. And you didn't resist? His question carried the tone of accusation disguised as inquiry. I stood, Evelyn replied. Sometimes standing is enough. Leah tugged at her sleeve, her voice urgent. They were going to burn the barn. They were going to kill the animals. Grandma, she... Evelyn's hand pressed against the girl's arm, silencing her. Kane's eyes narrowed. He studied Evelyn with the patience of a predator. We'll need statements. Full report. These men, did you recognize them? Evelyn shook her head slowly. Faces I've never seen. But they'll be back. The sheriff sighed, turning to his deputies. Secure the property. Photograph everything. We'll get a crew to clean this mess up. His tone shifted as he addressed Evelyn again. Softer, almost kindly. You've had a hard day. Let us take care of the rest. But his eyes betrayed something else, a flicker too quick for most to notice. Evelyn caught it. She had seen that look in border towns, in men who pretended to guard while pocketing their cut from smuggled goods. The look of someone pretending to protect when all they protected was themselves. Leah, oblivious to nuance, pressed on. Grandma, tell him what they said. About the deed. About... Evelyn's hand squeezed tighter. The girl faltered, confusion shadowing her face. Kane stepped closer, lowering his voice. You've got nothing to worry about, Miss Ross. This county looks after its own. Evelyn met his gaze, unflinching. Does it? For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Then Kane tipped his hat, breaking the tension. We'll post a car on the road tonight, just in case. As the deputies moved through the yard, Evelyn guided Leah toward the porch. Her shoulder brushed against the splintered wood where the invaders had shoved her earlier. She felt the sting still in her bones, but she held her frame steady. Leah whispered furiously once they were out of earshot. "Why didn't you tell him everything? He needs to know. He's the sheriff." Evelyn's voice was a whisper edged with steel. "Because the sheriff isn't who he pretends to be." Leah recoiled. "What do you mean?" "Not here," Evelyn said. "Not now." Inside, the house was a ruin. Chairs overturned, dishes shattered, photos scattered across the floor. The air carried the smell of smoke from the near burning, mingled with the metallic tang of dust. Leah sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. Evelyn knelt beside her, the movements of a woman used to kneeling for other purposes, to clean rifles, to bind wounds, to dig shallow graves. "They'll come back," Leah whispered through her fingers. "What are we going to do?" Evelyn's hand rested against her granddaughter's hair, the gesture tender, almost fragile. "We'll do what we must. We'll endure. We'll fight if we must. But not in their way." Leah lifted her head, eyes wet, searching. "I saw that picture of you. In uniform. Was that real?" The question lingered. Evelyn did not answer. Instead, she rose, walked to the window, and stared out at the sheriff's men combing through the yard. The red and blue lights spun against the dusk, painting the land in colors of warning. From the corner of her eye, she saw Kane speaking quietly with two deputies near his cruiser. Their heads bent close, too close for innocent talk. One of them handed him something small, a folded slip of paper, maybe. Kane pocketed it without breaking stride. The pivot struck then, sudden and cold. Evelyn understood. The sheriff wasn't merely careless, he was involved. His calm at the scene, his lack of surprise, his soft words meant to lull her. None of it was coincidence. She turned from the window, her voice low. "Leah, listen to me. You must keep quiet. About the photograph. About what you saw in my eyes. About everything. Do you understand?" Leah nodded reluctantly, fear mixing with doubt. "But Grandma, do you understand?" Tears welled, but the girl nodded again. Evelyn's hand pressed lightly against her shoulder. The weight of command had returned, unshaken by time. Outside, engines roared to life. Deputies began loading back into their vehicles, evidence bags carried under arms. Sheriff Kane lingered, scanning the horizon before turning toward his cruiser. His gaze drifted briefly toward the porch where Evelyn stood framed by the broken window. Their eyes met across the distance. Neither looked away. His smile was small, unreadable. He tipped his hat once more before sliding into the driver's seat. The convoy of patrol cars rolled out, dust rising behind them, leaving silence heavy in their wake. Leah broke it first. "I don't trust him," she whispered. Evelyn's lips tightened. "Good," she said. "Hold on to that." The yard grew dark as night folded over the land. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of spilled gasoline and broken earth. Evelyn stepped onto the porch, the boards creaking under her weight. She looked out at the fields, at the barn looming like a ghost, at the oak tree that had stood through every storm. The world felt suspended, waiting. She knew the next move belonged to her. Silence had kept her hidden long enough. Now silence would become her weapon. Behind her, Leah hovered in the doorway, eyes wide, voice small. "Grandma, what are you planning?" Evelyn did not turn. She watched the horizon, her figure carved in the fading light. "Something they'll never forget," she said softly. The words hung there, unfinished, like a door left half open in the dark. The night settled deep around the Ross farm. The wind carried ash from the wrecked barn roof and whispered through the cottonwoods at the fence line. Evelyn sat at the kitchen table with a single lamp burning, its glow casting long shadows across the broken glass and overturned chairs. Leah hovered at the counter, clutching a cup of tea she hadn't touched, eyes fixed on her grandmother as if trying to solve a riddle written in flesh and bone. The silence between them was heavy, filled with the echoes of what had not been said. Evelyn cleaned a shallow cut on her forearm with a rag dipped in whiskey. Her hands moved with the calm of ritual, every motion precise, efficient. Leah finally broke. "You knew what you were doing out there. The way you looked at them. The way they stepped back. That wasn't just courage." Evelyn's gaze stayed on the rag. "Courage is overrated." "Then what was it?" Her grandmother said nothing. Only the rhythmic sound of cloth against skin filled the space. Leah's frustration burst out. "I deserve to know. You kept it secret all this time, but I saw the picture. I saw the way they looked at you. You're not who you pretend to be." Evelyn raised her head. The lamplight carved hard lines across her face. Her eyes were sharp, the kind of sharp that cuts without moving. "Pretend? No. I became something else when I came back here. But some things never leave you." The words slipped into Leah like cold water. She leaned back against the counter, uncertain whether to feel safe or terrified. A knock broke the tension. Not the hurried bang of panic, but a measured rhythm, two short, one long. Evelyn's body stilled. She knew that signal. She hadn't heard it in 20 years. "Stay here," she ordered. She rose slowly, every step deliberate as she moved to the door. Her hand hovered over the handle, the weight of memory heavy against her palm. When she opened it, the night spilled in, carrying the smell of sage and gasoline. On the porch stood Raymond Cole, pastor of the small church on Route 9. His shoulders were slumped with the weariness of a man who had carried too many secrets, but his eyes burned with something fiercer than scripture. He removed his hat, nodding once in respect. "Evening, Evelyn." She did not invite him in right away. She studied him the way she had studied the Cartel men earlier, as though measuring truth against posture. Finally, she stepped aside. "You picked a dangerous night to come." Raymond crossed the threshold, gaze sweeping the wreckage of the kitchen. Leah straightened, surprised. "Pastor? What are you—" "I'm here because you're not alone," he interrupted gently. He set a canvas bag on the table. The thud it made was not the sound of food or prayer books. It was the heavy clink of metal. Evelyn opened it with steady fingers. Inside lay boxes of ammunition, wrapped tight in brown paper. Leah gasped. "Pastor!" Raymond's voice cut her off again, harder this time. "Sheriff Kane's been dirty a long while. Half this county knows it, but no one dared to speak. Tonight changes that. People are ready to help, Evelyn. They just need someone to stand first." Evelyn met his eyes across the lamplight. "And you think that someone is me?" "I know it is." Leah's confusion twisted into fear. "You're talking about fighting them. All of them. That's impossible." Raymond shook his head. "Not impossible. Costly, yes. Dangerous, certainly, but not impossible. The cartel feeds on silence. The sheriff protects them because silence pays his bills. If someone breaks that silence—" He looked at Evelyn, not Leah. "The tide shifts." The old soldier's silence stretched long. She picked up one of the cartridges, rolled it between her fingers, felt the weight she remembered too well. Her pulse steadied. It was the same rhythm that had guided her through ambushes in faraway deserts, the rhythm of inevitability. Leah broke in, her voice trembling. "Grandma, please. You can't. You'll get killed. We'll both—" Evelyn's hand touched hers, firm. "I already nearly died once tonight, child. They will come again. If we wait, we lose everything. But if we prepare, Her eyes shifted back to Raymond. Then maybe we turn their mistake into their ruin. The pivot landed like a stone dropped in water. Leah saw it, felt it. Her grandmother had crossed a line. There was no return. Raymond opened his mouth to say more, but Evelyn raised a hand. No sermons. Leave the bag. Go home before they notice you're missing. If you want to help, keep your people watching. Tell them nothing more. He hesitated. They'll ask why you. Because I know how. Raymond's eyes softened. Then may God keep you. He left without another word. The sound of his truck fading down the road until only the wind remained. Leah clutched her grandmother's arm. Tell me the truth. Who are you? Evelyn's gaze moved to the window, to the oak tree beyond, its branches black against the starlit sky. Her voice was quiet, stripped of pretense. I am someone they should have finished when they had the chance. The words sent a chill through the room. Leah pulled back, struggling to reconcile the woman who baked bread and mended fences with the one who spoke like a weapon waking from slumber. Evelyn returned to the table, began sorting the ammunition into neat rows, her broken furniture and shattered glass ignored. Leah watched in silence, the shape of her grandmother changing before her eyes. The house creaked as the wind pressed against its wounded frame. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once, then went silent. Evelyn's head tilted, listening. Her instincts prickled like static under the skin. She rose, crossed to the window, and peered into the dark. At the edge of the fields, faint shapes moved. Two men crouched in the grass, binoculars catching a glint of starlight. Scouts. Watching. Waiting. Evelyn's breath left her in a slow stream. She let the curtain fall back into place, turning to Leah. Go upstairs, she whispered. Why? Because eyes are on us already. Leah hesitated, fear freezing her to the floor. Evelyn's tone sharpened, cutting through doubt. Now! The girl obeyed, her footsteps quick against the stairs. Evelyn returned to the table, extinguished the lamp. Darkness swallowed the room. Only the faint glow of moonlight through broken windows remained. She stood in the shadows, her figure still as stone, listening to the scouts shift in the grass, to the low hum of engines idling farther down the road. The silence pressed heavy, broken only by her steady breath. The night felt suspended, as though holding its own breath, waiting for the strike that had not yet come. Evelyn closed her eyes, remembering the drills, the cadence, the quiet prayers whispered in foxholes where no prayers should have lived. The past was not gone. It had been buried under soil and work, waiting for the night it would be called up again. Her granddaughter's frightened eyes lingered in her mind, bright and questioning. Evelyn felt the cost of what was coming settle into her bones. The cost of silence had been high, but the cost of breaking it would be higher. Still she stood, unflinching, as shadows moved at the edge of her land. And when the wind shifted, carrying the faint click of a radio from the watchers in the grass, Evelyn Ross smiled, small, grim, a promise whispered only to herself. Dawn bled into the horizon, painting the sky with muted streaks of rose and gray. Evelyn Ross stood on her porch, coffee mug cooling in her hand, eyes fixed on the fields beyond the fence. She had not slept. All night she had listened, the shuffle of movement in the grass, the faint click of radios carried on the wind, the silence between those sounds heavy with intention. They hadn't come closer. They hadn't needed to. Watching was enough. Leah joined her, hair tousled from restless sleep, clutching a blanket around her shoulders. She looked small in the morning light, a child pretending to be a woman. Are they still out there? Yes. Evelyn's tone was flat, factual. She handed the mug to Leah, who took it with both hands, grateful for the warmth. What do they want? Control. Fear. Same as always. Evelyn's gaze didn't shift. But mostly, they want us to believe we've already lost. Leah sipped the bitter coffee, grimacing. Feels like we have. Evelyn turned her head just enough to look at her granddaughter. That's the trick. Make you believe the fight is over before it's begun. The words lingered. Leah lowered her eyes, ashamed of her doubt, but Evelyn's hand brushed lightly against her shoulder. It wasn't comfort so much as reminder. Strength could be carried in silence, too. From the barn ruins, a thin trail of smoke still rose. Evelyn crossed the yard to inspect it, boots crunching against gravel. Leah followed, hesitant. The animals were gone, the stalls blackened shells, the smell of charred wood and burned hay thick in the air. Evelyn crouched near the doorway, brushing ash aside with her hand. Beneath the rubble, she revealed something intact. A metal box, scorched but unbroken. She carried it out into the light, setting it on a fence post. "What is it?" Leah asked. Evelyn opened the latch. Inside lay a coiled length of wire, a small toolkit, and a folded cloth containing sharpened stakes. Not farm tools. Traps. Old habits hidden in plain sight. Evelyn's voice was matter-of-fact. "You use what you have. You make the land itself fight with you." Leah's eyes widened. "You planned for this? Even back then?" "Planning is survival." Evelyn didn't elaborate. She pulled out the stakes, running her thumb along their points. "You're going to help me set these." "Me? You think they'll wait for me to do it alone?" Evelyn's tone softened slightly. "Strength is not passed down by stories, Leah. It's learned by doing. Today, you learn." The morning passed in a rhythm that felt foreign yet familiar. Evelyn taught her how to string fishing line low across doorways, to weave thorny branches into near-invisible snares, to angle sharpened stakes in the tall grass where shadows would fall. Leah's hands shook at first, fumbling with knots, but Evelyn's steady presence guided her. By midday, the girl's movements had steadied, her breath slower, her eyes sharper. They returned to the house for water. Leah collapsed at the table, wiping sweat from her brow. "It feels wrong," she said softly, "like we're preparing for war." Evelyn set down her canteen. "That's because we are." The words struck Leah like a blow. She stared at her grandmother, searching her face for softness, for hesitation. She found none. The knock came then, sharp, insistent. Evelyn's body went still. She motioned Leah toward the cellar, but the girl shook her head stubbornly. Evelyn sighed and opened the door. Sheriff Howard Kane stood there, hat in his hands, expression carefully arranged into concern. Two deputies loitered by the cruiser, scanning the fields with bored eyes. Kane's voice was warm, too warm. "Morning, Miss Ross. Mind if we come in?" Evelyn blocked the doorway. "Depends on what business you have." "Just checking in. Heard some trouble out this way last night." He smiled faintly. "Want to be sure you and your granddaughter are safe." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "You were here last night. You saw the damage." "Still," he said smoothly. "Good to double-check. Dangerous times. Best not to leave two women alone out here without protection." Behind her, Leah bristled. "We don't need—" Evelyn cut her off with a look. The sheriff's smile twitched. "Smart girl. Knows when to let her elders talk." He leaned closer. His voice dropped, for Evelyn alone. "They'll come back, you know. And when they do, you'll want friends on your side. Friends like me." His meaning was clear. Friendship bought. Loyalty sold. Evelyn met his eyes, unflinching. "And what's the price of such friendship, Sheriff?" Kane's grin sharpened. "Cheaper than what they'll charge you." The pivot landed hard. Evelyn understood. He wasn't offering protection. He was demanding tribute, the same way the cartel did. She saw it in the way his deputies shifted their weight. in the way his fingers drummed casually against his hat brim. A man confident he already owned the outcome. Evelyn stepped back just enough to close the door. "We'll manage." Kane's smile faded. His voice hardened. "Be careful, Miss Ross. Pride can get people hurt. Badly." He tipped his hat, turned, and walked back to his cruiser. The deputies followed, laughter trailing after them like smoke. Leah burst out the moment the engine faded. "Why didn't you tell him everything? About the scouts? About what you're planning? Maybe he could—" "No." Evelyn's tone cut sharp. "Kane's not here to protect us. He's here to make sure we break the way he wants. Trust me on this, child." Leah bit her lip, torn between faith and fear. She glanced at the traps they had built, the ash still rising from the barn, the looming oak that seemed to watch over them. Finally, she whispered, "Then what do we do?" Evelyn looked out across her land, where shadows stretched long in the fading afternoon. "We wait. We prepare. And when they come, we make sure they regret it." The sun dipped low, painting the horizon blood red. Leah lingered at the window, eyes scanning the tree line. She thought she saw movement, a flicker of shadow against the fence, but when she blinked, it was gone. She shivered and turned to her grandmother. Evelyn sat at the table, sharpening one of the stakes with calm precision. Her face was unreadable, her hands steady. The rasp of steel on wood echoed in the dim room, each stroke a promise. The girl's voice was small. "And if we can't hold them?" Evelyn did not look up. "Then we make sure they never forget trying." Outside, the wind rose, bending the grass in waves. Somewhere beyond the ridge, engines rumbled faintly, like thunder still distant, but moving closer. Evelyn's eyes narrowed at the sound, and her hand paused only a moment before resuming its steady, relentless work. The day ended with that rhythm, the rasp of steel, the sound of distant engines, the unspoken weight of what was coming. And when night fell, the yard seemed to breathe, alive with shadows and unseen watchers. Evelyn Ross stood guard at the window, her silhouette framed in darkness, her eyes locked on the horizon. Waiting. Night wrapped itself tight around the Ross farm. The house, wounded and boarded where it could be, sat crouched against the dark like a battered prizefighter refusing to leave the ring. Evelyn Ross stood in the kitchen with the lamp turned low, her rifle resting across the table. She ran a cloth down the barrel with the care of a surgeon preparing instruments. Every movement was methodical, patient. Leah hovered by the window, peering out into the yard. She thought she saw shapes shifting near the fence, but when she blinked, they were gone. "They're out there," she whispered. "Yes," Evelyn answered without looking up. "What if they come tonight?" Evelyn set the rifle aside. "Then tonight ends differently for them than the last one did." The calm in her grandmother's voice unsettled Leah more than the threat outside. It wasn't bravado. It was certainty, carved into every line of Evelyn's face. A sudden thud shook the porch. Leah gasped, stepping back. Evelyn rose soundlessly, motioning for silence. She picked up the rifle, moving toward the door with the fluidity of someone who had rehearsed danger all her life. The knock came again, softer this time, deliberate. Evelyn opened the door a crack. On the porch stood Raymond Cole, his face pale in the moonlight. He carried another canvas bag, heavier than before. "I brought more," he whispered. Evelyn ushered him in, closing the door quickly. Leah exhaled in relief. "Pastor, you nearly scared me to death." Raymond set the bag on the table, the weight of its contents rattling dully. "Supplies, food, water filters, spare batteries, and this." He pulled out a folded map, spreading it across the scarred table. "Old surveyor charts. There's a service tunnel that cuts under the road. Not many know about it. If you need to leave unseen, that's your way." Leah leaned over the map, her hope flickering. We could escape. Evelyn's finger pressed firmly against the yard marked Ross property. Escape isn't the plan. Raymond studied her, troubled. You mean to fight them here? This land is my life, Evelyn said. Every inch has been paid for twice over. They take one fence post, they take my blood with it. I won't run. Leah's voice rose, brittle. But we could live. Grandma. Living without dignity isn't life, Evelyn cut in. Her tone was not sharp but final, like a stone dropped into still water. Raymond rubbed his jaw. If you're set on this, then you'll need more than traps. You'll need allies, people who've lost as you have. They're ready. They just need your word. Evelyn shook her head. I won't see neighbors buried for my fight. It's not just your fight, Raymond said softly. It never was. The words hung heavy. Leah looked from one to the other, torn between fear and faith. She wanted to believe her grandmother was right, but she also saw the exhaustion etched deep in her face. A sharp crack outside shattered the moment. Gunfire. One shot, then another. The three of them froze. Evelyn moved first, crossing the room to the window. She pulled the curtain aside just enough to see. A figure sprinted along the fence line, one of the cartel scouts, clutching his shoulder as he fell into the grass. Raymond swore under his breath. Neighbors must have spotted them. Jenkins' boys, maybe. They've been patrolling the back road. Evelyn's lips pressed into a thin line. They shouldn't have. Shouldn't have? Leah asked, incredulous. They just helped us. Now the scouts know we're not alone, Evelyn said. That changes their play. The pivot cut sharp. Silence no longer protected them. The war had widened. Moments later, headlights bloomed on the ridge. Engines rumbled, growing louder, closer. Evelyn dropped the curtain, her voice clipped. They're coming. Raymond grabbed the map, shoving it back into his bag. You'll need to decide now, fight or run. Evelyn chambered around, the sound loud in the small kitchen. We fight. Leah's breath hitched. Grandma. Upstairs now, Evelyn ordered. Remember what I taught you. Stay low, stay quiet. If you hear me call, move to the cellar. Don't argue. Leah hesitated, torn between obedience and the urge to stay. Evelyn's eyes locked onto hers, harder than steel. The girl obeyed, bolting up the stairs, her footsteps muffled against the worn wood. Evelyn turned to Raymond. You shouldn't be here. Neither should you, he replied. But here we are. The two shared a look, years of quiet understanding compressed into a single moment. Evelyn nodded once, acceptance without gratitude. Outside, the convoy stopped short of the yard. Doors slammed. Men shouted in Spanish, their voices echoing across the dark fields. Evelyn crouched low, rifle braced against the window frame. Her breath slowed, body sinking into the rhythm of waiting. Through the scope, she counted them. 6 men fanning out, rifles ready. 2 more lingering by the trucks. A small number, probing, not yet the storm she knew was coming. The leader's voice rose above the rest, harsh and mocking. Old woman, you think you can hide behind neighbors? Think you can defy us? We'll teach you what happens to those who forget their place. Raymond muttered a prayer under his breath. Evelyn ignored it. Her focus narrowed to the scope, to the movement of shadows, to the heartbeat pounding steady in her ears. She marked her target, exhaled, squeezed. The shot cracked the night. A man fell, screaming, clutching his leg. Chaos erupted. Muzzle flashes flared as bullets tore into the house, shattering more glass, splintering wood. Evelyn ducked, shifted, fired again. Another man dropped, his weapon clattering uselessly beside him. Raymond dragged the table onto its side, turning it into makeshift cover. They'll surround us, he shouted. Let them try, Evelyn answered, reloading with practiced ease. She moved like water, flowing from window to wall, every shot precise, every movement deliberate. From upstairs came Leah's muffled cry. Evelyn's chest tightened, but she didn't falter. She called up, voice steady. "Stay down!" A grenade clinked against the porch, rolling toward the doorway. Evelyn's eyes snapped to it. Without hesitation, she seized Raymond by the collar and dragged him toward the hallway. The blast ripped through the front room, fire and splinters exploding outward. Smoke filled the air, choking and acrid. Raymond coughed, ears ringing. "They'll burn you out!" Evelyn's face was calm, almost cold. "Then we make the fire theirs." She reached beneath the sink, pulling free a glass jar filled with gasoline-soaked rags. Old tricks. Improvised weapons. She shoved it into Raymond's hands. "When I say, throw." Bullets ripped through the side wall. Evelyn pressed her back against the plaster, counting heartbeats, tracking the rhythm of gunfire. Her eyes burned with smoke, but her mind was clear, sharpened by decades of training that had never left her. Outside, the men regrouped, shouting orders, their boots pounding closer. Evelyn waited, listening, feeling the moment gather like storm clouds. "Now," she whispered. Raymond hurled the jar through the shattered window. Flames erupted as the truck's fuel tank caught. Men screamed, stumbling back into fire and smoke. Evelyn pressed to the wall, rifle ready, her face lit by the glow of burning metal. Leah's voice carried down from upstairs, high and terrified. "Grandma!" Evelyn's eyes snapped upward. The fight wasn't just outside anymore. Something had made it in. Smoke clawed its way up the stairwell, curling into the rafters. Evelyn Ross lifted her head toward the sound of her granddaughter's voice, her chest tightening. Leah's cry had cut through the chaos like a knife. Something, or someone, had slipped past the defenses. Raymond Cole coughed through the haze, eyes wide. "I'll hold them here," he said hoarsely. "Go." Evelyn shook her head once, sharp and final. "No one holds alone." She thrust a spare pistol into his hand, then rose from behind the shattered wall. Her rifle hung ready as she bounded for the stairs, boots crunching over broken glass. Leah's scream came again, muffled now, panicked. Evelyn's body reacted before thought. She took the steps 2 at a time, breath steady despite the ache in her ribs. Each shadow along the hallway stretched long in the firelight, each sound a possible threat. The bedroom door at the end of the hall was half open. Inside, a man's silhouette loomed, his hand clamped over Leah's mouth as she fought like a cornered animal. The pistol at her temple gleamed in the shifting light. Evelyn's voice cut through the space, low and lethal. "Let her go." The man jerked, dragging Leah closer to his chest, using her as a shield. His words were rough, panicked Spanish. She caught only fragments, orders, warnings, desperation. He waved the gun toward Evelyn, sweat glistening on his forehead. Leah's eyes locked with her grandmother's, wide with fear but burning with trust. Evelyn lowered the rifle slowly, her finger hovering above the trigger guard. "You walk out now," she said evenly, "and you live. You touch her, and I end you where you stand." The man's grip trembled. He shifted, trying to edge toward the window. Evelyn's eyes tracked every movement, calculating the angle, the distance, the line of fire. She saw the opening, the smallest fraction of exposed chest as Leah twisted her body. She fired once. The man staggered, eyes wide with shock. His pistol clattered to the floor as he collapsed, blood blooming dark across his shirt. Leah stumbled free, gasping for air. Evelyn caught her, pulling her close for a heartbeat, then pushing her toward the hallway. "Downstairs," she ordered. "But Grandma—" "Now!" Leah obeyed, legs shaky beneath her, but Evelyn stayed behind. She stepped to the window, scanning the yard below. Fire still roared near the trucks, casting twisted shadows across the field. Men shouted as they scrambled for cover, some firing blindly toward the house. Raymond's pistol cracked from the front room, his silhouette lit by the glow of flames. Evelyn's heart clenched at the sight of him standing his ground. For all his years in the pulpit, he carried himself tonight like a man who had shed fear long ago. Evelyn returned downstairs, guiding Leah into the cellar where shadows swallowed them. She pressed a lantern into her granddaughter's hands. "Stay here. Do not move until I call, no matter what you hear." Leah clutched the lantern, tears streaking her face. "Please don't leave me." Evelyn brushed a hand across her cheek. "I'm not leaving. I'm fighting. That's how I keep you." She climbed back into the smoke-thick air. Raymond crouched behind the overturned table, exchanging fire with the men outside. His jaw was set, his eyes bright. "They're regrouping," he warned. "More will come." Evelyn knelt beside him, reloading. "Then we make this costlier than they ever imagined." The night pulsed with violence. Bullets tore through the siding, splintering beams, sending plaster raining down. Evelyn returned fire, every shot measured. She didn't waste rounds on panic. She aimed for knees, shoulders, arms, places that ended fights without ending lives. Each scream outside was both warning and message. She wasn't fighting like they expected. Raymond glanced at her between volleys. "You could have killed them all already." "I don't waste death," she answered. "It's too permanent." He nodded, understanding more than she had expected. The fight dragged, both sides breathing in smoke and rage. Then the sound shifted, a deeper rumble, an engine heavier than the trucks that had come before. Evelyn's stomach tightened. Reinforcements. The pivot came quick. Through the haze, she saw it. A black SUV rolling slow, deliberate, its headlights cutting across the field. The passenger door opened. Sheriff Kane stepped out, his badge catching firelight, his revolver loose at his side. He shouted above the noise, his voice commanding. "Enough! Hold your fire!" The men obeyed instantly. The sudden silence was worse than the gunfire. Evelyn stood behind the broken frame of her doorway, rifle trained on the sheriff. Kane's eyes found her through the dark. He smiled thinly. "You've made your point, Miss Ross," he called. "But this ends tonight. You can't fight the county, the cartel, and me. Not forever." Evelyn didn't answer. She only adjusted her stance, finger brushing the trigger. Kane spread his arms as if inviting her to shoot. "Go on. Do it. Prove what you are. The widow who turned killer. The relic who couldn't stay buried. The whole county will see what kind of monster you really are." His words cut sharp, meant to wound deeper than bullets. Raymond whispered near her ear. "He's baiting you." "I know." Leah's face flickered in her mind. The cost of silence, the fight for recognition, the respect that must be earned. Evelyn lowered the barrel slightly, not surrendering, but refusing his trap. Kane's smile faltered. For the first time, uncertainty shadowed his face. "You're already finished," he muttered. He gestured to his men. Engines roared to life again. The convoy pulled back slowly, headlights swinging across the yard, dust rising into the night. The sudden quiet was deafening. Only the crackle of flames remained. Evelyn stood in the doorway, rifle steady, eyes locked on the retreating vehicles. She didn't lower it until the last taillight vanished over the ridge. Raymond exhaled, sagging against the table. "They'll be back. In force." "Yes," Evelyn said softly. From the cellar came the sound of the lantern being set down gently, then small footsteps climbing the stairs. Leah emerged, pale but unbroken. She looked at the ruined house, the flames licking what was left of the trucks outside, the shattered glass scattered across the floor. Her voice was quiet, but resolute. "What do we do now?" Evelyn turned, her face unreadable, her eyes sharp as ever. "Now," she said, "we prepare for war." The firelight flickered across her features, casting them into shadow. For the first time, Leah saw not just her grandmother, but the soldier that had always been there, waiting. And somewhere beyond the ridge, engines growled again, distant, gathering, promising the night was far from over. The sun bled into the horizon, pale and merciless, painting the land in copper and gold. Smoke still lingered over the yard, drifting from the charred skeleton of the barn. Evelyn Ross stood on the porch with her rifle across her lap, eyes locked on the empty road. Every nerve in her body hummed with the memory of the night before: gunfire, firelight, the retreat of Sheriff Kane's convoy. She knew silence would not last long. Leah sat on the steps, knees pulled to her chest. Her eyes were hollow from sleepless hours, but her voice carried quiet steel. "They'll come again." "Yes," Evelyn said, "and worse than before." "Yes." The words hung in the morning air. Leah stared out at the fields, where traps lay hidden among the grass. She had helped set them, her hands raw from knots and thorns. For the first time, she understood the land not as inheritance, but as battlefield. Raymond Cole arrived just after sunrise, his old pickup rattling into the yard. Dust clung to his jacket as he climbed out, carrying a satchel heavy with papers. His expression was grave, but there was fire behind his eyes. "It's spreading," he said. "Word of what happened here. People are talking in town. They know Kane's crooked, know the cartel's got their claws in this county. They're ready to push back." Evelyn shook her head. "Talking and fighting are not the same." "Maybe not," Raymond allowed. "But talking becomes standing, and standing becomes fighting. You showed them that." Leah turned, searching her grandmother's face. "He's right. You can't do this alone." Evelyn's jaw tightened. Alone was how she had lived, how she had survived. Yet the night had proven otherwise. Raymond's steady hand, Leah's sharp eyes, the neighbors' stray gunshots breaking the silence. The line between solitude and isolation had thinned. Raymond opened his satchel, spreading the papers across the porch table. Photographs, bank ledgers, signed deeds, all damning proof linking Kane to the cartel. Evelyn studied them, her face unreadable. "Where'd you get these?" she asked. "People who still believe in right," Raymond answered. "Men Kane thought he owned. They've been keeping records. Quiet, careful, waiting for the right moment." Evelyn sifted through the evidence, each page heavier than the last. "This won't matter to men like Kane. They own the courts, the deputies, half the county." "Then it doesn't go to them," Raymond said. "It goes higher, federal, beyond his reach." Leah leaned forward, hope lighting her face. "That could end it, Grandma. For good." Evelyn folded the papers, her hands steady. "Evidence is slow. Bullets are faster." Leah flinched at the words. Raymond exhaled sharply. "You can't win a war by killing shadows. If Kane falls, the whole structure cracks. That's the fight that matters." The pivot struck deep. For the first time, Evelyn hesitated. All her life she had relied on precision, on action. But war had taught her one truth. Victory was not always the clean shot. Sometimes it was patience, endurance, the discipline to strike at the heart, not just the hand. Engines broke the silence. Leah stiffened. Evelyn was already on her feet, rifle raised. Down the road, 3 vehicles approached slowly. Not cartel black, but dusty trucks filled with neighbors. Men and women stepped out, armed with hunting rifles, shotguns, even pitchforks. The Jenkins brothers. Old Mrs. Powell with her grandsons. Young families with tired eyes but steady hands. They gathered in the yard, silent until Raymond spoke. They came to help. Evelyn scanned their faces. Farmers, teachers, mechanics. Not soldiers, not killers. Yet here they stood, drawn by something larger than fear. She felt the weight of their eyes, waiting for her word. Leah whispered, awed and frightened. "They're here for you." Evelyn corrected softly. "They're here for themselves." A hush fell over the group as Evelyn stepped down from the porch. She stood in the dirt, framed by the rising sun, rifle in her hand. Her voice carried, low but certain. "They will come back." Cain and his men, the cartel behind them. They think we're weak, that we'll bow or break. They are wrong. This land is ours. This fight is ours. But understand, once you stand, there is no stepping back. The crowd shifted, uneasy but resolute. The Jenkins brothers nodded. Mrs. Powell raised her chin, defiant. One by one, heads lifted. Leah's heart pounded as she watched her grandmother speak with the gravity of someone who had carried commands across foreign soil. This wasn't the widow she had grown up with. This was the soldier revealed, the quiet valor unmasked. Raymond's voice broke the silence. "So what's the plan?" Evelyn looked out across the fields, at the horizon where dust might already be rising. Her eyes narrowed. "We hold. We wait. And when they come, we show them this county will not kneel." The neighbors exchanged glances, fear mixed with determination. Hope flickered like a fragile flame. Leah stepped closer to her grandmother. "And if we fail?" she whispered. Evelyn lowered her gaze to her, the faintest hint of a smile softening her face. "Then we fail standing." The words settled heavy, final. From the ridge beyond the oak, the distant growl of engines rolled across the fields. Stronger this time. More of them. The sound of inevitability drawing near. The neighbors stiffened, hands tightening on their weapons. Evelyn raised her rifle, the morning light catching along its barrel. She planted her boots firmly in the dirt, every line of her body rooted in the land she refused to surrender. Leah's breath caught. She felt the air itself tighten, stretched thin between the promise of battle and the fragility of hope. The convoy's dust cloud rose higher, closer, swallowing the horizon. Evelyn Ross stood at the center of her people, silent, unyielding, her finger resting near the trigger. The war had come, and the world seemed to hold its breath.